This episode is brought to you by Kia's first 3-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Anthony J. Placek about people and leadership development. Anthony J. Placek, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have a chance to chat. You have great background, great experience in the areas of leadership development and people development. And I know you do a lot with culture transformation and trying to help leaders figure out ways to create empowerment types of cultures within organizations. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Before we get started, I just wanted to read Anthony's bio for everyone. Anthony Placek is an expert in the fields of leadership development, cultural transformation, and operational consulting. He has over 15 years of experience as a strategic operations leader and proven success in growing and scaling and healthcare operations, improving quality, profitability, and strengthening brand share through creative organizational management and leadership. Anthony started his career as a physical therapist. He quickly took on increasingly complex and progressive roles in healthcare operations management. Over the last several years, he has been a strategic and critical leader, consistently driving growth, profitability, efficiency, and the highest standard of healthcare services for a collaborative approach to team building and cultural enrichment. What a great background, a really interesting focus that you have. And I'm super excited to have the chance to chat. Anything you would like to share with everyone by way of personal background or additional context before we get started?
I think that, the only thing to really share is that, according, in regard to the bio, is that this pathway that I've stumbled through and on in personal growth and development around leadership development has been one that has been an exploration through my, personal experience and much in the way of research on the literature and leadership, and in particular, leadership relevant to neuroscience. And so I think my ideas and the framework that I've developed originates from a place of learned mistakes and walking down a path where I was able to reflect on those mistakes and grow as an individual. And arrived at, an opportunity to continue to reflect and research where I was at, seeing remarkable success with when applied. And so it gives people the tools they need to really accelerate their leadership approach and ultimately get results. So it's a culmination of some trials and tribulations, and some research, but ultimately a great framework to give people a little bit of a jump start and perhaps not fall down some of the traps that I did and fell into as a young leader.
Well, yeah, and there's so many pitfalls, and we all, we're all imperfect. We're all going to make mistakes, and we're all going to have things that later on we're going to look back on and, with shake our heads and dismay that, like, why did we do it that way? That's always going to happen. But we can definitely learn from others and learn from the challenges others have faced and how they've responded to them. And so I love that approach that you take. And something that you just said that really intrigued me that I thought we could start with is the neuroscience of development, of leadership and people development. Tell us a little bit more about that, what you found as you've looked into the research, as a kind of a foundation for how we can start to move forward with productive development efforts in our organizations.
Yeah, I think, really contextually, the point is come to understand mindset. And mindset really predicts the behaviors that you see. And the start point, and where I think, a lot of people struggle is really defining who they are as a leader, and not really understanding perhaps how they're showing up. And it's paramount to understand yourself well, and how perhaps you're being received in that context. That really is the start point of the program. And in a neuroscience perspective, it's really getting to understand your personality, your communication style and approach, and your motivations, because those things, although perhaps you recognize them or sometimes you don't, you're bringing them to your interactions that you have while leading others. And if you don't have awareness to those blind spots, you can really perhaps lose the ability to connect with your team, and it can really create perhaps friction, or a little bit of a longer road to get the results that you desire.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really important thing to remember, a good perspective to have as we try to move forward. And there's so much interconnectedness between our own personal development in our own leadership capacities, and that of our people, in helping people on our team, prepare for perhaps future roles or future opportunities they might have. There's so much interconnection with all of this, and the neuroscience, the personality elements, and the interpersonal relationships and communication elements that all will drive, the either the success or the failures and the setbacks that organizations and their people may find. I'm curious about what you think leaders should do as they're starting to put together a development strategy for their people and their organization. What are some of those first steps that they should be setting up? Some of the first questions they should be really considering?
Sure, that's a great question. I do want to trail back a minute and capitalize on something that you mentioned, and that's communication. How we think and communicate creates the connections and the community that helps build the culture. And for me, I think going back to the element of neuroscience, and not only understanding who you are, but also understanding your team. It allows you to communicate with the right approach and right style that would resonate with them. And there's quite a bit of research out there on social emotional intelligence, but ultimately people connect, and they connect through a little bit of an innate sense of communication through the amygdala. It really is how we're sensing things around us, versus in particular the words that are being used. And I think to understand where you're at and how you may be perceived around some of your communication, verbal and nonverbal, is critically important. And so the crux of really moving people in a direction as a leader or influencing them is through the right methodology and positive communication. And so I think in order to understand where the start point is, to get back on track with your question, and what the foundation is, you have to understand where you're at as a leader, your approach, your style in communicating. You have to, in a lockstep to that, understand your team and engage with them and understand their personalities and their style of communication. I think those are the foundational pieces, so that you can have that innate engagement that we all sense as human beings, from a neuroscience perspective. But as you overlay the concept of connection, you also have to be aware of the style that you may need to take in a moment given the situation, and also perceptually where your employees are at in that same situation. And so I think having a sense of understanding of the style that you may need relative to that personality, and how to communicate with that personality that will resonate to address the particular situation that needs to be addressed in the moment, and it kind of transcends into situational leadership. And I think a lot of folks in leadership don't necessarily understand where people are at in their perspective. And a leader may take for granted that they kind of see a solution, and where if someone's in a learning phase in something new or a new task, they need a little bit more hand-holding, if you will, and education before they arrive at an opportunity to have a little bit of autonomy and problem solving. And so you as a leader need to shift and mold your style and approach, and how much you're giving the individual team member relative to their personality, but also in context to the situation. And so I think in terms of foundation, the very start point is really just coming to understand the dynamics psychologically with your team, and the best way to communicate with them. And then the next step would be to really understand the context and situation that you're engaging over relative to the moment in time.
Yeah, interesting. I think going back to what you're reiterating, that communication piece is really so important. We do need to be adaptable. We need to be agile. As organizations, of course, we need to do that. The same mentality applies to leadership, because our people are not a monolith. They each have their own unique backgrounds. They have their own unique challenges. They have their own unique styles, their motivations, the salient motivations that drive them. And ultimately, they're all going to be at different places in their own professional development and their professional journey. So with all of that in mind, only if we know our people are we then in a position where we could at least try to have an effective strategy of interacting with them and then helping to develop them. So one thing I hear people push back on a lot when it comes to personal development, people development, and leadership development of our team is, like, why would we bother with that? It's really expensive, especially millennial and Gen Z individuals, workers these days. They're not sticking around very long. They like to move from job to job. So why would I invest a lot into my people and developing them for future roles when they may just take the learnings and all the coaching and the mentoring and the trainings that they do, and then they're just going to take that with them to their next job?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. But I think that is a scarcity mindset approach in leadership, where you're concerned about not investing and pouring in others because they may take that elsewhere. I think as a leader, fundamentally, you're there to influence others, and you're there to empower them and inspire them to arrive at the best version of themselves. And I think that's fundamental in leadership. And people, going back to the science of it, feel that you have their best interest in, and it really deepens the relationship. And when you are concerned about their well-being, their progress, and their growth, and you invest in them, you start to establish trust. And I think that's the most fundamental element in a relationship, in particular in a working relationship. Because if there's not trust and you're concerned about putting forth your effort and losing that effort, you're going to be reluctant to share. And that actually would drive more of a wedge in that opportunity of building trust. And so I think that you have to go into it knowing that if they do leave and they're onto something better, that you left a positive mark on them. And that's what you can and have that opportunity to do as a leader. And that's okay. It's not time lost, although, sometimes our egos can get in front of us and feel, hey, I was slighted and I invested in you. But at the end of the day, it's not about you as a leader, it's about them. And to put that trust forward and invest in them, I think you build that better relationship, and perhaps they're less likely to jump ship because they know that you are there for them and that you're trying everything that you can do to pull them along to the highest level that they so choose to arrive at or aspire to arrive at. And I think that's, the important piece of the system that I have. And it moves into the next pillar of the system, and that is building that culture around you. And culture is based off of trust and alignment, where you are there to help pull everyone in that same direction. And if you are reluctant to put forth that effort, it would be very hard to pull people in that same direction, and you'll miss the mark on building culture. And I firmly believe that culture in the right mode and movement pattern of it really is what drives results. It gives that above and beyond factor that everyone's looking for. But if you approach it with a scarcity mindset and you're reluctant to share and develop and invest in others, they're going to be reluctant to invest in the organization, and in the culture itself is going to be a little bit, each to his own, and you won't be able to arrive at that higher level functioning team that's going to go above and beyond for what it is that you aim to do.
Yeah, amen. Well said. I completely agree. And what a great response to that question. It really is such a common question, though. It kind of frustrates me every time I hear someone ask it. I feel like I want to pull my hair out a little bit or bang my head against the wall, because anyone who's asking that question, I feel like they're kind of fundamentally missing the point of what it means to be a leader. And yeah, we just don't know. We don't know what people are going to do. We don't know where people's priorities are going to be in a year or two from now, and we have no way of predicting how anyone is going to how, if they're going to stick around or if they're going to move in a different direction, for a whole huge variety of reasons. And so, but if we approach it from a scarcity mindset, as you described, and ultimately we're driven by fear, driven by this perception that we're just going to end up wasting our time and our energy and our money on these people, we're basically going to ensure and guarantee that good people are going to leave. We're going to ensure that people aren't going to put their best effort in to the organization, because why would they if we're not investing in them? And why wouldn't they jump ship to go to the next opportunity that looks better? Because they're clearly not going to be getting an incredible experience working with you if you have that kind of an attitude. So I think that's key, that we have more of an abundance mindset, that we realize that together, as we lift each other, the whole ship is raised, and everyone has an opportunity to be better. The culture is stronger. People will be more creative and innovate because there's more trust, because people feel bought into each other. I think that's just such an essential foundational element to having any good people and leadership development strategy within an organization, is we just have to know that we will invest in some people that will choose to leave, and we will invest in other people that will stay. But it's the culture that matters, to be able to drive continued creativity, innovation, and success for the organization.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Well, so maybe my last question as we wrap up our discussion today. We work to develop our teams. We work to develop their capacities, and hope that we'll have a pipeline of future potential leaders that can grow into roles, that might be stretch roles for them down the line. But how do we develop a pipeline for senior leadership types of roles, especially in with younger employees, millennial, Gen Z workers? What have you seen in organizations that have been successful in preparing those workers to tackle some of the complex types of challenges that they would face in senior leadership opportunities?
That's a great question, and my thoughts around that is really one, going back and on the aspect of culture, and on creating a environment where there's trust. Where there's trust, you allow, as you mentioned, the creativity, the innovation, the openness. And with that openness, you really allow for a sense of inclusion, and people having that ability to contribute more, share their idea. And I think that as you do that, you need to learn in order to be equipped to take on some higher levels of responsibility. I also would say hand in hand with that, as you develop trust, there's an art to delegation. And as you're engaging your team and your employees and you're looking to help them ascend through the ranks, they need the context and understanding. And so you have to bite off, little chunks of responsibility and let them grow into it. Let them lay out your expectations clearly, but also, let them try their own way. And going back to, how I opened up about failure is okay. In particular, if you reflect and learn from it. And I think, starting off on those small concepts and allowing people to grow into it comfortably and not worried about being judged or saying, hey, you're not going to get this job because you didn't get this task done, again, would be that short-sighted scarcity, but allowing to explore them to take on a task and see how they problem solve and help coach them along, so that they can arrive at a sense of autonomy in managing that responsibility, and perhaps even push them along the lines towards mastery. And I think that as they unfold and become more skillful with added responsibility, it allows them to feel more contributory to the organization, and they feel greater purpose with that contribution. And it really goes hand in hand with ultimately motivating them and teaching them that, yes, this is a process. You might not know everything up front, but you're going to learn it. And as long as you are thoughtful about it and approach it and communicative, we're going to work together to get you there so that you have the context you need to be successful in that next stage of role at the senior level.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. And with that, Anthony, we are drawing close to the end of our time together today. But before we close, I want to make sure that I give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected, find out more about what you're doing currently.
Absolutely. The concepts that I've pulled together is a framework. It's called the LEAD system, and it is learn, engage, activate culture, and deliver results. We didn't get a great chance to dive into the art of execution, but once you build your culture, there's a discipline and an art to execution. It becomes an iterative and reflective process as well. And that's really how results are generated. And that walks lockstep with the last answer that we had relative to delegation and giving people more opportunity to contribute to the organization. And so the LEAD system is the framework that I look at. It's a malleable framework in which it's a lens of analytics, but also a system and approach that you can implant in terms of cultural development and learning and development for your team. That said, the best way to reach me regarding the framework, as well as the opportunity to consult and hear a little bit more of my operational ideas and expertise, would be through LinkedIn, or email at ajplacek, the numbers 12 at iCloud.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anthony. I really encourage listeners to reach out to Anthony, get connected, see more about what he can do to help you. And Anthony, our time was short today, but this was a great conversation, and perhaps we can continue it another time and go a little bit deeper into some of these topics, because it's so important. And I think all organizations are grappling with, how to develop their people, how to attract and retain the best people in this knowledge economy, how to make sure that we are prepared to upskill and reskill our workforce. All of these types of interrelated types of issues are really important in the modern economy. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope everyone can continue to stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope everyone has a great week. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.